Thank you very much, Hope, for bringing us that reading this morning. And Bill, you're probably not surprised to find that where you were being led by the Lord was the same place in which I was being led by the Lord. So thank you for choosing that song this morning. It's always encouraging to know. In fact, Steve, my husband, was putting the PowerPoint together last night, and he said to me, "Did Bill know what you were preaching on this morning?" No, he didn't know. It's great to see how the Lord works in bringing together a word for today. For those of you who are here for the first time, my name is Lynn. I'm part of the residential team here at Harn Hill. I'm the newest girl on the block, so still finding my way around. So if you want to know something, don't ask me, ask one of the other members. The team, they'll point you in the right direction. And Steve is my husband, who's manning the sound desk today. And it's funny you should start off with that kind of bit of a downer type conversation that you were feeling. And I was going to start on the same sort of note, really, for a similar reason. Steve and I have been watching at home the series on Putin's neighbours. Don't know if anybody of you have come across that as well. Yeah. Oh, gosh. About what it means to be living in a nation that borders Russia and how they all feel about that. It's quite a sobering programme, fascinating as well. But actually, I was particularly, intrigued, I suppose, really, or concerned. The nation of Finland are so concerned about having Russia on their borders that they have built these vast tunnels of nuclear bomb shelters that can house several million of their population. This isn't just the odd one that a few people could go into. These places are vast. I was also slightly intrigued from an environmental and a planning perspective, really, that they are not just got these buildings that are there for in case of use of emergency. They're using them all the time. So they're using these shelters as schools, places of teaching. There's gyms in them and swimming pools. There's leisure centres, ice rinks, anything you can imagine, really. They look quite a nice space to go and in a cold country. I'm guessing this is quite a good use of resources. But actually, the sadness is that they think that a few walls are going to protect them from what's to come. And actually, that's not the case. It might hold back the impending forces for a couple of weeks, but it probably won't do more than that. We regularly face our own storms of life. And in the same way as perhaps the Finnish feel, we want somewhere that we can go to take refuge in. We want a refuge, don't we? I can understand why the Finns built it. It kind of gives them that sense of, well, be all right. We've got somewhere that we can run to when it all goes terribly pear-shaped. We'll be all right. We've got these amazing shelters. And I think, actually, sometimes we think that as well. And so, actually, this psalm that I chose this morning, we really love it because it speaks, doesn't it, and reassures us about a God who is our refuge and our strength, the one who is a proven help in times of trouble, always there when we need him. Because we too want to have somewhere that we can run to in times of trouble, when life becomes challenging, maybe begins to spiral out of control. We want to find that safe space and that shelter. And maybe we want our own bomb shelter. Of course, it was David that wrote these Psalms, and he knew what it was to face trouble, to be on the run, fleeing from a king, Saul, who wanted to hunt him down and take vengeance on him. But David knew that he was the Lord's anointed one, that God had called him in due time to be king, and that ultimately it would be God who would protect him. Of course, that didn't stop David from feeling threatened, from being scared, from feeling overwhelmed and exhausted, but he trusted in the God who he knew had plans and purposes for his life. It's maybe not surprising then that often in the Psalms we hear God referred to as a place of refuge, that place of security and safety, the place where we can run to when we need protection, we feel that need for it, and where we want to find sanctuary. And I really love that you chose that song because, of course, in this Psalm, verse 11, God is described as the fortress, as that strong building. In David's day, it was more likely to be a fortified settlement. Thick-walled cities David would have thought of, often on high mountains, designed to be impenetrable and intimidating to the enemy. That's what you wanted. Some good thick walls. That was going to give you all the protection that you needed. And David had made Jerusalem his fortress city, his well-defended and safe capital, where they could withdraw to and defend the nation. So when David calls the Lord his fortress, he was picturing strong walls, high defences, a secure place where no evil can enter. And of course, God often protected David physically. You read lots of stories where David is saved from Saul, saved from the advancing enemies. But actually, there's more to it that David didn't just see it as these physical boundaries, this physical place of safety. Because often when David and the other Old Testament writers are describing God as fortress, they're primarily picturing God as the unshakable strength of their souls, the source of hope and salvation that no enemy, physical or spiritual, can ever threaten. That's what we want. We want our souls to be protected and kept safe. And so for us in our own storms of life, those trials and tribulations that we experience, that we go through, it's this place of refuge, this fortress that we long to escape to. A space where we can effectively run and hide. Wait till it all blows over. Wait till the storm passes. That's what we want. We kind of want to, perhaps go under the duvet, don't we? Lord, I'll just come out when it's all still again. I'll just go under the duvet until then, and then I'll come back out again. We so long for that protection and that shelter. But actually, physical spaces, as I'm sharing, aren't enough. What we really want and need is the presence of a loving friend who will support and strengthen us and sit with us through the storm. We want someone with us. Now, some of you will have come across our dog Finley, our spaniel. He often makes his needs known to us. So sometimes we'll leave him out in the courtyard. We tend to put him on a long lead, and he's got a kennel he can come in and out of. And he can sit and he can watch the world and Kate's cats go by. I'm pretty confident that being tied up with Kate's cats is safe. But he enjoys being out in the open air and seeing what's going on. And he'll be okay for a while, and then we'll have this little single bark. Oof. And then a couple of minutes later, another single bark. Oof. And this will increase in frequency, this one single bark. Because actually what he's saying is, as anybody remember that I'm out here, I'm feeling a bit lonely, and actually I'd like to come in now for some company. So you go out and he greets you as though he's not seen you for several days with great excitement, and he wants a bit of a fuss, and then he'll go back in and he'll go back to sleep. And that was the bit of the story, but I must just tell you another bit. The other day, he was barking continuously. Finley never barks continuously when he was outside. Steve and I were a bit, Anyway, so Steve got sent out to investigate what the problem was. And there was Finley sitting just outside the back corridor there, barking in a big puddle of water. And it turned out that there's a drain that goes into a guttering type thing, and the guttering had got blocked. Not a guttering, what is it? the tray had got blocked, so Steve had to go in and dig it all out with his hand and clear it all so that the water drained away. But Finley was effectively saying, you know, I need rescuing, help, my feet are getting wet, who's going to come and sort me out? It was either that or he was doing the flood emergency warning system. Flood alert, everybody come here. Anyway, what he wanted was someone to come alongside him and to rescue him, to help him out. It's the presence of God who is our refuge and our fortress. It's Jesus, the person of Christ that we need and that we seek when we feel lost and all at sea in life. It's him, the person of him, that we must run to and find our shelter. Because actually, it's knowing that presence of God within our own lives is the thing that we really long and yearn for. To know him alongside us and with us. Finding God, drawing into his presence, actually, so much easier to say those things than actually to experience them. Because we struggle to know and experience his presence with us. We know it's possible, we hear about it all the time. You know, us preachers, we come up and we say, oh, it's this wonderful thing. But actually, there are times when God feels quite distant and out there and we think, that's not happening for me. Why is that not happening for me? We talk about these things, but sometimes it feels difficult to experience for ourselves. And we wonder, how do we come into that place of deep intimacy with the Lord? We have the answer in this psalm. David knew the answer. Be still and know that I am God. Again, it's one of those verses we love, don't we? Oh, it's such a comforting verse. Just be still and know that I am God. Because it's in the waiting, in the silence of God, of being still, where God often reveals his presence. We hear it throughout Scripture. For God alone, my soul waits in silence. This invitation into silence and solitude. Because when the storm is raging, when we feel blown and tossed about, when we feel overwhelmed and exhausted, we're invited to enter quietly, in stillness and in silence, into God's presence, where we can find refuge and sanctuary. And the psalmist goes on to declare that once you are in that place of God's presence, it's there that we'll find joy. In the river whose streams make glad the city of God. It's there that we find all the help we need. God will help her at break of day. It's there that we find the security as God is our fortress. It's there that we find our peace as wars cease. And we long for those things in our lives. But for many, the reality is that sitting and being still in God's presence is quite difficult. We find that difficult to achieve. We really wrestle with it. Actually, we can find stillness and silence quite threatening. We don't like it. And instead, we seek to fill our lives with noise and activity to distract us from that. We'd probably much rather do something, to be busy, to sort something out, whatever it is, to detract ourselves from the emotion or to resolve the issue by action. We'd much rather be proactive about it, doing something. But God's way is to invite us into his still presence. But I recognise, including for myself and for many of us, seeking that solitude and silence is both uncomfortable and difficult. We don't find it easy. Brother Lawrence wrote a famous book called Practicing the Presence of God. And therein lies the clue. If we're to come and be still and to meet with God, to experience his presence, we need to practice that It doesn't come automatically. We don't just read the verse and go, oh, we just need to be still and we'll know the presence of God. It's something that we need to be intentional about, to be determined to do. It takes time and it takes patience to learn to be still enough to stop the din of our minds that deafens our hearts. You know it, don't you? You stop. I never think, oh, I haven't done this, I haven't done that, oh, what about that? Your mind goes into this place of worry, anxiety, of I must do this, must do that, all crowds in as soon as you stop. And it's learning how we lay those aside, one by one. Yep, Lord, I've heard that I'm worried about that. I'll just give that to you. Thank you for now. Yes, I know that I need to do that. I'll just write that down. Thank you. I'll come back to that later. Putting stuff aside until eventually we find the place of quiet and stillness. And that takes practice. If we can do it and manage a minute, hurrah, well done us. If we can move up to 5 minutes, fantastic. Any longer than that, you're doing amazingly. Well done. Being able to perhaps create and find that space where we can enter into God's presence and his stillness. Because actually, in that place of stillness and quiet is when we begin to hear God speak to us. When we're busy running around and doing everything, we're working stuff out in our own ways, but actually we want to be able to hear God's voice speaking to us, both as reassurance and as love and as comfort. Because it's only in that stillness where really healing and restoration begins. But actually there's more to it than that. It's not just about in that place of stillness and quietness that we hear God. It's also the place where we get to know who God is. We begin to understand his character as he gradually reveals more of himself to us. But that takes us to be still so that we can sit with God and just wait, not doing or saying anything, just waiting with God. So that we can begin to discover who he truly is. To enter into the glorious mystery of the greatness and expanse of God. We make God too small most of the time. We need to sit with him to realise his expanse and his majesty and his gloriousness. It's in the solitude as God reveals more fully his character to us that we're led into deeper and more intimate relationship with him. Be still and know. In the stillness and the quietness is where we discover God to be our refuge and our strength, our ever-present help in times of trouble. But I just want to end with a reflection from this book, Finding Your Hidden Treasure. I don't know if anybody's come across it. Really recommend it. If you want to get into silence and solitude, I can really recommend that book for you. And this is a reflection based on the invitation to be still and know that I am God by an unknown writer. And it's called The Womb of Silence. Not in the whirlwind, not in the lightning, not in the strife of tongues, or in the jangling of subtle reasoning is he to be found, but in the still, small voice, speaking in the womb of silence. Therefore, be silent. Let the past be silent. Let there be no vain regrets, no brooding on past failures, no bitterness, no judgment of oneself or of others. Let all be silent. Be still and know. Be still and look. Let the eyes of the mind be closed, that you may hear what otherwise you would not hear, that you may know what otherwise you would not know. Abandon yourself to him in longing love, simply, holding on to nothing but him, so you may enter the silence of eternity and know the union of yourself with him. And if in the silence he does not answer, he is still there. His silence is the silence of love. Wait then in patience and submission. It is good to wait in silence for his coming. Amen.